Iowa football is back to 87 scholarships accounted for the upcoming 2024 season. Yes, we need to get back down to 85. I think we're at one time, 91, 92. Kale Vanderbush, the latest to enter the transfer portal and departing from the Iowa program. The Indiana native and Hawkeye tight end was an interesting recruitment. He actually was committed to Tim Lester's Western Michigan Broncos out of high school. We'll talk about it in just a second. But first, I want to remind all of our listeners, all of our viewers here, if you have not done so, please go over to our Facebook page. You've heard me say this before. Until we can get a big number here on Facebook, I'm going to keep touting this. Go over to Facebook and like/follow the page from the Hawkeye of the Storm. There's also a link to it in the description. I've heard some people say, hey, I search it on Facebook. I can't find it. Of course, it's hard to get a hold of Zuckerberg and the powers that be at Facebook. So just click the link in the description. That will link you to our Facebook page. Again, from the Hawkeye of the Storm on Facebook. Thank you in advance. So Iowa tight end Kale Vanderbush has entered the transfer portal just hours following news that Iowa QB Deacon Hill would be entering the portal. And this news does not come as a surprise to me. I've tried to not throw names out there a lot over the last month, but this young man was at the top of the list, not because I have anything against the kid, or that I think he's not a great young man. I don't know Kale Vanderbush. However, it seems that he had been buried behind a really solid group of tight ends. Now, he came in the same class as Addison Estringa. He redshirted his first year, did not play last year. Remember, he's from Plainfield, Indiana, and I believe he was actually considered to be a higher prospect, a better prospect than Addison Estringa. And I'm certainly not any recruiting guru, but I remember watching both of those guys on tape and saying, boy, Addison looks like the player with more upside. Now, all guys at that level, especially if you're coming in to play tight end, both those guys played some wide receiver in high school. You're going to have to figure out route running and blocking and whatnot. But I really liked Addison Estringa, and you can go back and listen to my comments on Addison. I wasn't as sure about Kale Vanderbush, and that doesn't mean he can't succeed somewhere else, but it appears that he got buried behind guys like Luke Lachey. Of course, last year, Eric All was a part of the program as well. Addison Estringa, a guy who came in the same year as Kale Vanderbush. Estringa has really vaulted up the depth chart. Even last year with Zach Ortworth, that was a surprise to me. That was a kid I did not have pegged as an early contributor. He played last year as a true freshman. And of course, we've seen Hayden Large sort of move over to tight end. It appears that Iowa is going to be utilizing less fullback. And even when they do run with a fullback, I wonder if that's not with Eli Miller this coming season. So Large is another guy. My guess is ahead of Kale Vanderbush, was ahead of Kale Vanderbush. I really like Grant Leaper. Gavin Hoffman enrolled this spring as well. He's a 4-star tight end. And then Michael Burt, who's another really solid prospect out of Omaha, is coming. So that's a loaded tight end room for Tight End University. And so I can just tell you, when I've had conversations with Abdul Hodge over the last couple of years at Media Day, I've asked about the young groups. And not that Abdul Hodge doesn't acknowledge Kale Vanderbush and his contributions in practice, but it does seem like he was oftentimes the odd man out, or maybe the last guy mentioned. That doesn't always mean anything. But again, I was not totally surprised by this. He's listed at around 6'5", 220, 225. Interesting, when he was being recruited, I mentioned it at the outset, he had offers from Western Michigan, also an offer from Air Force and Utah. Some interesting offers there. And yes, Western Michigan was actually coached by current Iowa OC Tim Lester when they offered Kale Vanderbush. And what's interesting about the recruitment of Kale is he originally committed to Western Michigan before flipping to Iowa. So very interesting situation. And I'm not saying that Iowa didn't kind of encourage him to leave. I'm not saying they did or they didn't, but it's just interesting, the narrative there. He's committed to Tim Lester, then he leaves. Tim Lester gets a job here, and then he leaves. But that's the nature of college football. And again, I think if Kale wants to play, his best bet is going somewhere else. And he may have been dinged up over the last year or two. I'm not aware of that, but that certainly hinders some progress, especially when you have a talented group pushing you. So best of wishes to Kale Vanderbush. I hope he finds a home somewhere. You would think if a guy is going to go from being buried at Iowa to being at the top of a significant depth chart or a Power 5 depth chart somewhere else, my guess is it might be at tight end. Iowa has such a history and a reputation developing tight ends. You would think maybe some program takes a chance on Kale because he's had a couple of years in the Iowa tight end system. I know it doesn't always work out that way, but I hope it does for Kale Vanderbush. Best of wishes to that young man. Iowa now down to 87 scholarships accounted for. They've got to get down to 85. I know the Swarm. People have told me, the Swarm can pay those extra scholarships. I doubt Kirk Ferentz wants to do that. And I would think most Swarm members don't love that idea, because I'm sure there's some guys on the roster that people are like, is this guy ever going to contribute? And we're having to foot the bill for these extra scholarship guys. That's where my mind goes, but I'm not telling you what to think or how to feel. Anyways, figured I'd give you an update. Down to 87 scholarships. Got to lose 2 more. We'll see what happens in the coming days. More coverage coming right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Have a great night.